Hey YouTubers, Zabernack here, playing some Planet Coaster, and we're back for episode 3 of Doragon Mountain. So as I said before in the last video, I actually changed the color of the coaster to mimic cloud wisps on this mountaintop, and it turned out really good. I liked how it looked, so I'm probably going to keep it that way. But the focus of this episode is actually working on the monastery on the top of the mountain. Now, finding pieces for this monastery was actually quite a challenge, because, since I said before, since this is all in miniature and forced perspective, you couldn't, or I couldn't, really build something and use larger pieces that might have fit well for a building of this design in this structure, just because of the size requirement that I had to stick to in order to give it the feeling of just being a very large mountain and a very small building on that mountain. So I was coming around here and playing with some some design ideas for all of the walls, and at first I thought that it would be a decent idea to actually use the stucco's little lip there as part of the building's structure on the outside that you see. But I think I came back to that in a few minutes, or a few seconds here actually, and I actually changed that and flipped them all around, just to give it a nice smooth face. And I did that mostly just to make it easier, because I put these windows in here, actually, for the outside structure, and it actually turned out really good using those. It gave it a really nice look, as well as it definitely added a nice structure piece, so the building looks like it's actually being held up by something. And I liked it too because it popped out of the building. It was light contrasting with dark. And that's the one thing about this game, is that a lot of the pieces are the same color, so it's rather hard to get a palette that works, but keeps things interesting. And I think that's essential in any kind of building that you see in Planet Coaster, or any kind of building that you'll do, is the ability to make your building stand out and certain attributes of it pop. So you see here, I'm actually putting them back in and just trying to get these as close to symmetrical as possible, and even, because that's one thing you'll notice in a lot of Japanese building, is there's always that kind of yin and yang feeling to their buildings. I sound so stereotypical saying that, but it's kind of what I was trying to go for here, because that's what you see, is you see a lot of odd numbers in Japanese buildings. So you see 3 posts on the end instead of, let's say, 4, or just the 2 on the corners. And it really does actually help add to the general feel of the building and what I'm going for. And as you can see here, even the walls right now are taking shape, and it gives you a very oriental feel with the paper and the box kind of construction of Japanese buildings and Chinese buildings and stuff like that. And then, since I knew that this was one of the smallest pieces that we had in our arsenal of building, I actually was going to use it for the whole entire roof, but thought it would be better to use it more as a trim to add on all of these wooden, or driftwood planks, I think they're called, in the game. And I was actually really pleased with how this turned out. It's subtle, because they're just a bit off, but since they're both brown, they add a very nice color to the roof. And the driftwood planks actually have a reddish tinge to them, and that's not just due to the fact that I was building this at dusk, which is something that I'm probably going to try and avoid for a lot of the other videos in the future, just because it's a little bit easier to not only build in like direct daytime in the game, but it's also nicer for you guys to see what the actual product looks like in the light, because in this game things can drastically change how this building looks, and even any kind of building for that matter, how it looks in the daytime. So when I was putting this together, I was trying to keep things as close to the shape of the roof as I possibly could. And you'll see me towards, well, I'm not quite sure when it is actually, probably in a few minutes, you'll see me actually starting to put the curve onto the outside edge of the building. So that little lip that you see flip up, usually on the corners and stuff like that of Japanese buildings. And it was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I played around with it for a little bit, and I actually didn't opt to make the roof follow those, and I think it turned out better that way, or leaving it that way, than having a little lip up that goes all the way around as well. It just gives a little bit more depth and flair to the corners of the building, which I really wanted to draw attention to because that's something that you see a lot of in Japanese architecture, and it's something that I really wanted to make pop and stand out. So when I added, if I added a roof to that and followed it all the way around, um, I don't think it would have the same visual appeal. So, anyways, moving on. I was trying to find something to fill in that space underneath, and I actually ended up using a roof piece. And because it worked so well on the actual building itself, I opted just to build it right on instead of manually placing every single piece. Now, this is one thing that I was trying to experiment with, and the building was just too thin to actually use it, were those red facades for, I think they're for the shops, from what I can gather. I was using those to try and actually get a red tinge into the building, like what you see with a lot of the very, I guess, royal palaces in Japan. And it didn't really work too well, like I said before, just because it didn't fit. If I was able to do it, I probably would have. But that's actually one thing I'd like to see in this game, is the ability to change the color and scale of objects as well. It would be a really nice feature. I would have rather have actually had this building have a more red tinge to it, red and dark, kind of mahogany, than black and brown. But since that's what we have to work with, I kind of had to go with it. And I'm still pretty pleased with actually how it turned out. But this will probably be the general style I use for building the rest of the Japanese buildings in the park, using this brown, white, and black kind of color palette. It works really well actually for this kind of building. Not as well as I would like, per se, but it gets the job done, and I think that's, at the end of the day, that's really what matters in this game. Because again, a lot of the times what you're doing in this is just kind of putting things together and hoping for the best, really, to give that general look. So, anyways, once I move on from the roof here, I actually made it pretty easy on myself and just copy and pasted it over a lot of these things, just so that it was, like I said, easier for me, as well as quicker to do as well. Because there's nothing worse than spending forever on every single little piece. There's shortcuts around that. So, as you can see here, like, I just literally copied two things over and just kept dragging them to make it look the same, like it carries on. But I don't know. I'm pleased with this building, but if I were to build one again, which I will be building again in the next episodes, I'm definitely going to opt for either a larger buildings or figuring out a different way to do some things. I think I might make more parts in chunks, such as these roofs. I might even make it so that on a single square I can have a end piece of roof with wall, then I can make a middle piece of roof with a wall, then probably do inner and outer wall corners, like you see on this building with the right corner there. That, and I'm also really going to try and actually have a stab at a pagoda, or pagoa, or however the heck you pronounce those things. And I think it was actually going to have that. I don't know if you'll be able to see it in this video, because it mostly focuses on this, but I'll definitely do a slowed down version in the next one, of where I'm actually going to put that pagoda, I'll probably actually do it in the uh, horseshoe loop. I'm actually not quite sure what it's called. I'll have to look that up. But it's on the opposite side of the mountain here, where the coaster crests, goes behind, loops around, and then comes back over to the front again. I'll probably do it in there so you actually circle around it, which I think would be pretty neat. Then I'm also actually going to have a stab at making a small village on the opposite side of the mountain there, where I had leveled out some of that terrain earlier. And I'm probably not going to do it as ornate as this, and I might even come back to this and make it a little bit more fancy, just because it is a monastery up here. But as you can see here, off the topic of that, I'm just probably putting in a garden. And actually, I think I also made my own tree over here. And I found a really easy way to do that, is to use the, I guess, driftwood branch, I think it's called, or something like that. The driftwood branch, and cover it in the kind of bottom mossy foliage stuff that you get. You'll see it in a second here. And it actually works really well. One thing I also found that works really well is when you do that and use like a 1 or 2 meter brush and actually add on the sticks to it, you can actually make a custom tree and then fill it in with brush or whatever else to give it the shape that you actually want. And it actually turns out really, really well. I did it earlier off camera, and I'll probably actually use it throughout the whole entire park here during the building. And you'll see me use it quite a bit, probably. But as you can see, I'm using the upside-down skull posts, or skull lamps, to give the posts around this thing a general feel of actually supporting the roof. And not only that, but they actually provide a small amount of lighting, because since it is a lamp post, technically, it actually lights up the monastery in a reddish kind of hue, which is really nice actually at night. And it makes a great eye-catcher piece for dusk or just after dusk in this park. It's actually really similar to the lighting on the Disney Castle, I find, which it's just pretty cool that it did that, and I wasn't even intending it to. It's kind of like one of those freak accidents where you're like, oh, hey, that turned out really well. And one thing too, just off the topic of lights, but as you can see here, when I'm putting in all of these trees and shrubbery and all that kind of stuff, one thing I like to do is to give some variation to the colors that you actually see in the plant life. And that's just to draw your eye to different places, so it's not everything is always green or everything is always red like with the flowers, or white, or whatever it is. And that's one thing that's really important if you're making a park, is to draw people's eye elsewhere than where it would normally be. That's what makes parks stand out and makes them different, unique, you could say. And that's one thing I really want to focus on, like I said, in this park, is to really make a different looking park and a unique looking park, but make it in a way so that it's not hard for anybody to do. And that's one thing that I find that I think a lot of people are intimidated by, is the fact that, you know, you've got people like Sivret and all of those kinds of YouTubers online that make this look so easy, and they just have these amazing results. But I look at it as, well, they're able to do this with these tools, why can't I? And then I just find ways around it, or copy some of their kind of building techniques, not copying their buildings per se, but just being able to figure out what's going to look good and how it's going to play out in the end. And like I said before, in this video, this turned out really, really well, and you'll see it here where I do a zoom in. And it's an absolutely beautiful piece. But anyways, that's the time I've got for today, so this has been a Let's Play with Zabernack on Planet Coaster. Zabernack out.